Counselor Blanks, ready when you are.
Okay, thank you, Jerida. And good evening, everyone. Thank you and welcome to our virtual Public Safety Committee meeting. Today's date is August 12th. Today is Thursday and the time is 6:32. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and recognize the folks around the virtual table. So I'll start with Mayor Sherry Cantor and our Deputy Mayor Leon Davidoff, Councilor Williams, believe Battalion Chief Siniscali, Town Manager Matt Hart, Chief Vernon Riddick, and Chief Greg Priest, and Councilor Lee Gold. I hope and looks like Mr. Robert Grimaldi, and I hope I didn't miss anybody. AC Tara may be on as well. Okay, so I don't want to delay. I know we have a lot of things that we want to cover, but before we begin, I would like to acknowledge our public safety team, both fire and police, for the heroic efforts that you displayed with the young woman and the tragedy that everyone encountered. I do want to just take a moment of silence since this is a young life that was just lost tragically in the midst of our summer months. Thank you. And I just want to also express my condolences to the family. This is always a very difficult and hard time for all parties involved, our first responders, our neighbors in the community, and certainly to the family. So I know that I'm going to keep them in my prayers for the days to come, and just would ask all of you to do the same. All right, moving forward. Our June 2nd minutes. I would ask that we go ahead and accept those minutes. I didn't see much correction. The one thing that I did see, Mr. Town Manager, is, I just lost it, so I'm bringing it back up. Just a point of clarification at the top. It says 6:35, but it says the meeting was called to order at 6:30. So we may want to just make that minor adjustment there. All right. So the next item is the proposed public safety forum with town manager and chief of police. But what I'd like to do is just sort of switch that agenda item around where we can begin with the fire department efficiency and effectiveness study. And I'd like to turn that over to both Mr. Hart and Chief Priest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Good to see you all this evening. Hope you are doing well. And Councilor Blanks, thank you very much for the moment of silence at the beginning there. We certainly all respect and appreciate that, and our hearts go out to the victim's family. So as the committee is well aware, we have been working through the efficiency and effectiveness study, which the firm of Fitch and Associates completed for us a couple of years ago. And we're also providing relative data points and the work we've done based on the recommendations we received from the study in the time over that time period. So this evening we have a presentation that focuses on the topic of fire prevention, a very, very important service that the town provides here in West Hartford, as is the case, I think, with almost all career fire departments. Fire prevention is a division within the fire department. In some smaller communities, it may be a separate department or office. Here, it's a very important component of the fire department. So Chief Priest and Chief Sensigali, I think Assistant Chief Sensigali will take the lead on the presentation after some remarks from Chief Priest.
Thank you very much, everyone. I have complete faith and confidence in Chief Cincigali, who is joining us from the National Fire Academy to conduct this presentation. I wholeheartedly support it. Be glad to answer any questions, and thank you, Mr. Hart, for the commentary about the value of the Fitch study. I look forward to Chief Cincigali's presentation.
I am sharing the screen. Okay, Chief, is that coming through good on your side?
At least from my view, I see,
Yes.
but maybe you have to hit got it and then go to presentation mode. There we go. And then I'm showing something that says got it, resize to change the video. I'm not sure if you see that, but
I don't see that.
we can, I mean, it's possible to move forward. Unless
Okay.
you're right, yes.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Mayor Cantor, town councilors, town manager Hart, and Chief Priest. My name is Michael Cincigali. I'm Assistant Chief and Fire Marshal for the West Hartford Fire Department. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you regarding the Fitch study as it applies to the Fire Marshal's office. Recognizing the length of the agenda this evening, I promise to keep my comments brief. Okay, before we discuss the Fitch study findings, we should take a moment to review the current staffing levels of the Fire Marshal's office and some of the statutorily required duties of that office. The Fire Marshal's office is currently staffed with a fire marshal, a deputy fire marshal, and a fire inspector who are full-time employees and work solely for the office. The office is supported by a part-time staff assistant and 5 fire officers who work on overtime assignments performing fire inspections. With the exception of the company officers, the staffing of the office has remained unchanged for the past 20 years. There are 3 specific duties that we are assigned by statute. They are code enforcement, plan review, and fire investigation. We'll discuss them in some detail in a moment. The Fitch organization was contracted to perform an evaluation of the Fire Marshal's office as part of their evaluation of the fire department. They reviewed the division in relationship to the statutory obligations for inspection. Based upon that evaluation, Fitch opined that the division needed to complete 1,881 inspections each year to meet the statutory mandates, and that the current staffing level was not adequate to meet those mandates. They recommended the addition of 2 full-time fire inspectors. The study did have some limitations. It only focused on the initial inspections, which is just a single aspect of the Fire Prevention Division's responsibilities. The necessary activities for abating the fire code violations, which include re-inspections and the abatement process, which may include court, were not included. Neither were the statutorily assigned duties of performing plan reviews and construction inspections, fire investigations, or the mandatory training to maintain fire marshal certification. Nor did the study consider the duties and responsibilities assigned by town policy, such as participation in the various work groups, such as the Safe Home Task Force and the Code Enforcement Work Group. It became apparent that further study was warranted, and using the NFPA Standard 1730 as a tool, we completed an evaluation of our statutory workload compared to the number of staff hours available. NFPA 1730 is the standard on organization and deployment of fire prevention inspection and code enforcement, plan review, investigation, and public education operations. To accomplish this task, we reviewed the past 7 years of data, capturing inspections, plan reviews, and fire investigations, as well as an inventory of buildings under the jurisdiction of the fire codes that was assembled with the help of Joe Dackers and our assessor's office. The state law has a priority for inspections based upon the occupancy classification of the building. Buildings where people live and places of assembly and educational occupancies require annual inspections. Non-residential occupancies such as stores and offices require inspections every 3 years. Manufacturing establishments require inspections every 4 years. The number of initial inspections that must be completed each year, according to this formula, are 1,881 as stated in the Fitch report. However, not included in the report were the average number of 550 plans that we receive each year for review, the average of 174 construction and certificate of occupancy inspections that we perform each year, or code compliance consultations and code complaints that are handled each year. Using NFPA 1730 as a guide, we estimated that the number of hours required to complete our statutory mandated tasks and found that an estimated 7,695 hours are necessary. Please keep in mind that these hours do not include any of the other tasks that we perform that are not tied to inspection, plan review, or fire investigation, such as attending the various work group meetings and other tasks that we do. Until July 2021, we had no way to track those projects or the time involved. The available staff hours were examined, deducting time for vacation leave, some sick time, and required training hours. It was determined that each full-time staff position had an annual net time availability of 1,422 hours per year. Current staffing has an aggregate availability of 4,267 hours available annually. By deducting the available hours from the number of hours required to perform those statutory duties, it was determined that there is a 3,428 hour deficit, which equates to 2.41 or almost 2.5 full-time positions in the number of hours available to discharge those duties. Now, since the Finch study, we have made some progress. We created the position of a deputy fire marshal and hired an experienced deputy fire marshal in October of 2029. We revised the company officer inspection program in September of 2020, and we started doing, instead of doing re-inspections for clearing minor inspections, we have started accepting photographic evidence as proof of that compliance. We've also purchased the activities module in the ESO program so that we can track tasks that are not associated with a specific property, such as attendance at all those meetings. We're also performing our inspections using iPads, which decrease the number of hours, which decreases the amount of time necessary to do the reports. We do have some challenges. The company officer inspection program is challenged with the availability of the inspectors, who are subject to seasonal and operation overtime influences when they come in and work. When they come in and work for the fire marshal's office, they come in on overtime. If there's a lot of overtime if there's a lot of overtime in operations, they're not available for our overtime. Also, the collective bargaining agreement does not permit the use of part-time inspectors, so it's difficult for us to go outside of the fire department manpower to pick up additional inspections or inspectors. Our number of required inspections continuously grow with construction projects, such as One Park Road, which is the renovation of the old convent on the corner of Park and Prospect, 243 Steel Road and 540 New Park. And significant duties, some aspects of the duties that we perform, such as fire investigations and code complaints, are emergent in nature and require a significant amount of time to complete. The work that the fire marshal's office performs is important to the overall safety of our community. While we're the only town agency that's required to inspect our multiple family apartment buildings at least once a year, many of these properties are owned by absentee landlords, and the conditions that we find create dangerous fire hazards and egress obstructions, which place the occupants in danger until they are corrected. The fire marshal's office is also the only agency required to inspect all commercial buildings on a regular basis. These inspections help protect not only the people who live, work, and worship in our community, but also the economic vitality of our town. Just a few days ago, New Hartford lost a large historic landmark building in the center of town. And also, as I learned this morning, a firefighter was lost in that fire. Lost were several buildings and 12 apartment units. Many other communities, such as Brantford and Mystic, have also lost blocks at the heart of their commercial district. Their loss leaves a gap in the fabric of the community. Consider losing a block in our town center and the impact that would have to the center, to the community, and to the vitality of the area. Statistics show that more than 50% of the businesses closed by fire never return. Regular fire inspections help to protect our commercial districts by identifying and correcting unsafe conditions before they become an issue. Town Manager Hart will address recommendations and will then open for questions. Before the conclusion, I would like to offer this closing thought. Community risk reduction is a vital component of the services that we provide as a department. It represents an investment that we make to safeguard our citizens and our economic vitality. So it's not only a matter of minimizing our liability and performing those inspections that were required by statute to perform, but it's also a matter of protecting the people that live and work and play in our community. Thank you. Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Assistant Chief Cinsigali, Matt Hart, Town Manager. And I'd like to thank Assistant Chief Cinsigali, Deputy Fire Marshal Grimaldi, Fire Inspector Adele, and our part-time admin assistant, Sue Bedford, for all the hard work they do year-round in our fire prevention division. Also appreciate Assistant Chief Cinsigali's good analysis that he's presented for the committee's consideration this evening. As he has explained, the Fitch study did recommend that we add some additional resources to that office. His own metrics support that, in addition of roughly 2 to 2.5 full-time personnel. So my plan is to work with Chief Priest to develop a phase-in plan to add some additional positions over a period of time, perhaps beginning with the next budget year. But that's something I'll work on with Chief Priest and present to the committee and then to the full council for your consideration. Again, the members of the division at present are working very well, working very hard, doing a lot of good things for us. But there's certainly more we want to be able to do working in the community, especially completing those regular inspections. You know, we do periodically receive complaints, and we respond to them. And we think that additional staff resources is certainly warranted for this division. I think that completes our presentation, Madam Chair. If you want to open it up for discussion and questions, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you, Town Manager Hart and Assistant Chief Cinsigali. I would open it up to the committee for questions. Who has a question? No one has any questions? Okay. Deputy Mayor Davidoff?
I don't really have a question, Carol, but I do have a comment, and I'd like to thank Assistant Chief Cinsigali, Fire Marshal, for the thoroughness of the presentation. I appreciate you really boiling it down with respect to taking the Fitch study, which was done several years ago, and going through the different components of what we do on a day-to-day basis here in West Hartford with respect to the statutory required inspections and duties of that office, and compiling the data to illustrate what our basically our annual workload is, and then being able to interpret that data and show us in real time where we are and what we're able to accomplish with the amount of hours we have allocated with respect to employees currently serving in this particular office. It clearly demonstrates that to be at full speed to definitely address everything that we need to address, additional staffing is necessary. The only thing that that was a possibility of looking into was whether or not there would be capacity in our bargaining agreement to see whether or not there would be some ability to have part-time inspectors. I don't know if we've explored that option in the past to see where we've gone, but in terms of what you laid out, basically, if that's not an option, the only other option is to start to plan to add additional personnel to perform these necessary inspections. And I think in the past you've gone through inspections of daycares, of swimming pools, of other of nursing homes, where there are people who are in a position who may not be able to assist themselves should a fire break out. So, and we don't even get to all the freestanding single family homes that we don't even inspect, okay? Where you can, anytime you want, determine that many situations are hoarding situations, which make it very difficult to respond to certain situations, and also increase the likelihood that a fire could start in those types of structures. So I'd be interested in hearing from the manager as to what type of timetable he thinks that we're going to be able to move forward on something like this, and perhaps he can enlighten us as to any possibility of being able to negotiate a part-time inspector, possibly in the short term, or maybe in the long term. So thank you for the opportunity to comment, and thank you again, Chief Sensigali, for what I think was a job well done. And I'm really glad to see that we're getting back to going through the various components of the Fitch study. Some of the things have changed, but in essence, the bigger picture is still there. Thank you.
Mr. Hart, did you want to respond?
Yes, I'm happy to. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your comments and good questions. With respect to our discussions with the bargaining unit, yes, we can certainly do that. This is an opportune time as we have just begun conversations regarding the next round of collective bargaining. Our existing agreement will be expiring soon, so it is an opportune time to have that conversation. With respect to the plan that Chief Priest and I intend to present to you, I expect you will receive that later this fall. We will look at a variety of options, including a revenue that the fire prevention provision currently collects, as well as other general fund revenues to help support the staffing resources that we think we need to add here. So expect to see something from us this fall regarding that. And with respect to phase in, I would imagine we would look to do this over a period of years. Unlikely that we would recommend adding 2 or more people at one time. I foresee a phase in. Thank you. Sorry to ramble a little bit at the end there.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So I know one of the components of the office is plan review, and I know that we assess a fee user fee for new construction. Are those fees set by statute, or do we set them ourselves?
May I answer that, Madam Chair?
Certainly.
Michael Cincigali, Assistant Chief Fire Marshal. They are actually established by town ordinance. The permission to charge the fee is by state code, but we set the fee.
Thank you, AC Sinisgali. Anyone else have any other questions or comments? All right, I have a question, and I'd also like to thank you for the report. Very informative, a lot of information where you really was able to break it down to a point that really spoke volumes. And a couple of questions that I have. One, as I was going through the report, which is quite lengthy, so my hat off to you in terms of the preparation and responding to the Fitch study. With the two fire marshals, I just often wonder, due to events unforeseen, if something were to happen to them, what is the backup plan in terms of making sure that those functions are carried out?
Michael Cincigali, Assistant Chief Fire Marshal. Madam Chair, we have redundancy in the office. Currently I'm the Fire Marshal. The second in command of the Fire Marshal's office is Deputy Fire Marshal Grimaldi, who's a certified fire marshal. He's been a fire marshal before coming to us. He was the fire marshal for the town of Bristol. He's extremely qualified and well-versed in all of the duties, and I have complete faith that Deputy Fire Marshal Grimaldi he does act on my behalf when I'm not there, and can, if I were to pass tonight and Bob took over, you would not have, you wouldn't even know I'm gone. And then coming up behind, we have, Fire Inspector Adele, who's really a novice, but right now she's gaining skills in fire inspection and fire investigation. So we have redundancy in the office, and then if something catastrophic were to happen, we've also got this. We also have the State Fire Marshal's office to rely on in terms of fire investigation, and would certainly come out and help us in other issues as well.
Thank you, AC Sinisgali. And that was a bit extreme, so nothing's going to happen to you. So the other question that I have is what you just sort of touched upon. So many of the buildings in town, in terms of we're now 2021 entering in 2022. So I know we have a number of old buildings, I'll say, more seasoned. And you mentioned some of these home or landlords that are probably don't comply with the rules that we have. So how do we keep those folks accountable, and how do we keep our residents safe, especially if we have repeat offenders?
Madam Chair, Michael Cincigali, Fire Marshal. When we go out and do an inspection, state statute also requires that we abate any fire code hazards that we find. So we issue the owner of the building an abatement order, ordering them to comply with the code within a certain period of time. That time is established by directives from the State Fire Marshal's office. And we work with the property owner to bring the buildings into compliance. When the property owner stops working with us, we also have the availability to refer the case to court. And we have referred from time to time cases to housing court, which is the final step in our abatement process. Once the case gets into court, the judge orders compliance. And but it's not unusual to go a year, especially if court is involved, before we bring a building into full compliance with the code.
Thank you for that clarification. And what has our experience been during the pandemic? Because I do know a lot of the court cases are a bit backed up.
Madam Chair, Michael Sinsagalli, we do our best not to go to court. We really strive for voluntary compliance with the property owners. Court is our last resort, and we haven't referred anyone to court in this during the pandemic.
That's good to know. And kudos to you all for doing a fantastic job. And then my final question is around the construction inspection, because I noticed that we have a few projects and we're going to have more coming up in the future. Can you just elaborate and touch upon that?
Okay, Madam Chair, Mike Sinsagalli, Fire Marshal. When we have a project coming in for construction, only the buildings that are covered under the fire code are the ones that we work with. So when when projects come in, the code requires that we do the plan review, and sign off on the building permit. It also requires that we make sure that the codes are complied with during the construction. We look at things differently. We look at different codes than the building department looks at. We look for compliance with the fire code, and the building department looks for compliance with the fire code. There is a little bit of crossover where that happens. We work with the building official's office. And then for the certificate of, so those are process inspections. And then we're also required to perform that final certificate of occupancy inspection before the certificate of occupancy is issued, to make sure that the building fully complies with the fire code. So depending upon the size of the project depends on how often we will do those construction inspections. When Blueback Square was being constructed, the volume of the buildings that we had to inspect, we set every morning aside a few hours every morning to visit the site and do some construction inspections.
Okay, thank you very much for that information. That's very helpful for me, especially. Okay, anybody else have any other comments or questions that they would like to ask Assistant Chief or Town Manager Hart? Okay, all right, then we'll move to the next agenda item, which is the proposed public safety forum with Town Manager and Chief of Police. So Mr. Hart and Chief Riddick, I'll turn it over to you two.
Thank you, Councilor Blanks. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I'll lead off and then ask Chief Riddick to elaborate. As the council and the committee are well aware, we have received, we've heard some concerns from our citizenry, from our residents regarding various crimes that have occurred in our community and throughout the capital region over the past few months. We have been dealing with property crimes. We have been dealing, related to that, we have been dealing with the theft of catalytic converters. We have had some crimes committed by youthful offenders, including a motor vehicle theft. And the motor vehicle actually had a 2-year-old occupant. Recall that from some weeks ago. That engendered a lot of attention. More recently, we've had complaints regarding late night, early morning activity in town center, as well as what appeared to be a semi-organized ATV ride through our community and other capital region towns. So, we've heard concerns from you. We've heard concerns from members of the community. We are not the only town dealing with these issues. The capital region, towns throughout the state, actually towns throughout the country are dealing with a lot of it. Some of it is a social media inspired phenomenon. Some of it is not. But what the chief and I would like to do, and we've done this successfully, as you will recall in the past, in our conversations with our religious community, as well as the conversations we had last summer in at the start of the police reform conversations in the wake of the death of George Floyd and others. We'd like to have something of a community conversation or a forum with members of our community. Ideally, we'd like to do that in person, but we understand the situation we're in. So we would plan to do it in a virtual format utilizing WebEx. Chief and I would have a small presentation, some opening remarks that we would like to make, but then we would reserve the bulk of our time for Q&A with members of our community. We're going to be doing something similar with our business associations starting off tomorrow morning at 8:30. You should have received an invite for that if you are available. If not, I'll ask Jerida to resend it. But tomorrow morning at 8:30, we're going to meet with the Elmwood Business Association, the Park Road Association, as well as the Home Design District on New Park Avenue, just to talk a little bit about the good work our police department is doing, particularly to address property crimes and how we can work collectively with them to better deal with some of these things and to take their questions and address their issues and concerns. So we're planning to lead off with 3 business associations tomorrow. We are still scheduling a session for West Hartford Center as well as Bishop's Corner. And then Chief and I are contemplating a conversation with the larger community next Wednesday evening in the 6 o'clock, 6:30 time frame. That would be Wednesday, August 18th. Again, many of these issues we've been dealing with for some years now. Some have really garnered additional attention this summer. We understand why. Our police department's been working proactively and effectively to address many of these things for a long period of time. We want to have a chance to chat with the community about that and talk about the good work we're doing and how we can work collaboratively with them. So let me pause there, Madam Chair, and through you, ask Chief Riddick to elaborate on my remarks. And then we want to get your input on the community forums that we're proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Chief Riddick.
Through you, Madam Chair, Chief Vern Riddick. Mr. Manager, you did an excellent job. I really have nothing more to add other than to say we want to hear from the public regarding their concerns. And I think it's very important when we do solicit the input and we hear, we can separate fact from fiction. That's really, really important attempt to allay fears. Many times rumors and innuendo start running amok. So it's just a great opportunity for people to be heard. And sometimes through these conversations, we might hear a solution we weren't even thinking of. So that's the intent for the community conversation. I enjoy this, the town manager does, and it's a great example of community policing. You know, the community and the police department working together collectively for public safety.
Thank you, Chief. Any comments or questions for Mr. Hart or Chief Riddick? Councilor Williams.
Madam Chairman, thank you, Mr. Hart and Chief. Appreciate the comments. I just had a sort of a question, I guess, slash thought. So I think the community conversations are a really good idea because the reasons you both articulated, you know, we've been receiving a lot of feedback and there's a lot of concern. But Chief, correct me if I'm wrong. You know, I remember it was like 18 months ago or so, we had the carjacking over in Bishop's Corner, and then you spoke to us. You gave a really thorough and good presentation about sort of the escalation of crime. And during that talk, you spoke about how the police department was limited because of state law in a lot of respects. And as these issues have come up this summer, whatever they are, and the town manager articulated a few of them, that seems to be another common theme that comes up. In other words, you know, our town police force and the way we enforce the law is restricted on some level by the state, or, you know, we're subject to some consequences of state policy. So I guess my question is, aside from these public forums, which are really important, I think, for the local community, what are we going to do to sort of engage the state delegation and address that part of the discussion? Whereas there's only so much we can do here on the town level when we have some state policies that we're subject to. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Williams. Chief, would you like to respond?
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair, Chief Riddick, through your indulgence, I do plan on addressing this as part of my presentation this evening. And if I could just go through the community action plan at the appropriate time, and then I also have thoughts and suggestions dealing specifically, Councilor Williams, what you're talking about now. So if I'm allowed to do that, I shall. Through you, Madam Chair.
Certainly. Why don't you just go ahead, and that way you can answer Councilor Williams' question.
Thank you. Jerida, if you could put up the community action plan, please, and I'll quickly go through that first. Jerida, I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Chief, I don't know if she might have stepped away. I can pull it up now, I think.
Okay. I can try to share my screen, but Chief Priest will definitely make fun of me. I do have it ready, so let me see what happens.
Do I have it up now?
Yep. There you are.
All right, I don't know if my screen is showing or the TM, the town manager screen is showing. So can you guys see my cursor moving?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so it's mine.
Well,
And how's the size? Can you see it okay? Do I have to expand it?
you could expand it a little more.
Oh my. How's that?
That's good.
Okay. Quickly, in box one, again, action and this decision. We continue our conduct and participate in community engagement efforts. I'm going to go to the next steps. What you see highlighted is the additional things that we have done since our last meeting. We had the community resource officers attend an 8-week Connecticut and youth police course facilitated by University of New Haven. That graduation is coming in the next couple of weeks. And what we did is have our officers engage with youth from the urban environments, hear their concerns, their view on policing, an opportunity for our officers to share our views and collectively work together again to demystify policing and to get, again, separate fact from fiction. The feedback has been really good, especially in light of what has occurred last year with the police reform and George Floyd and the protest. And again, University of New Haven is facilitator for this, and this is specifically for the CAP region, which was selected. So you have us, Avon, Simsbury, Farmington, Hartford, and the like participating with that, as well as Bristol. I think Bristol Police Department too. So we continue to go forward with that. Next, we have reviewing existing use of force policies. We've updated and made sure we're in compliance with all of our use of force policies. We'll go to next steps. We had officers attend a 6-section de-escalation training and confidence course. That was done by a jiu-jitsu instructor, former Detective Rob Magial. And the importance of this is verbal judo. Again, I think I've discussed this in the past. Many years when it came to police use of force, we were always taught to go, one level above. And in some discussions, we did use verbal judo and try and speak and bring some people down, but it's always to do more to gain someone's compliance or control. Whereas now, over the years, why do you bring fire to fire? So we're trying to, calm situations down. We're the professionals and work that way. Another, theme that's been reoccurring over the years with some of these shootings is that officers are forced into lethal force situations, quote unquote justified, because they don't have the physical skills or the training in ground fighting. So where you don't have to go to that next level, where you can just hold somebody until backup comes, put them in various holds, not choke holds, but arm bars and the like to gain compliance and control. And that, what we'll find is give officers confidence in their ability and hopefully lead to less situations in which force is utilized. Going down to number 3, ensure that all permissible departmental policies are available online. We've done a really good job with that. Going to our last box, we're up to 8 policies now. Our pursuit policy is there. Our use of force policy is there. Use of deadly force, use of force investigations, our complaint process, implicit bias, drug testing, and social media. And we'll continue to update and put more policies online. Our next box deals with number 4, our West Hartford Police Department, and getting more transparent in using our data. Again, a reoccurring theme at our discussions that we've had. We've gotten a lot better. We've updated with Power BI through NextGen, so we're becoming more and more data driven. We do have an administrative captain in that position, and we also have a sergeant once we get online with our body cams that will be assisting him with our data analysis and where crimes are occurring, what time, who, what, when, where, and how. So again, in an effort to be proactive instead of reactive. Going down to number 5, review the organization and composition of the Citizen Review Board. Again, you've been updated on this. The CPRB is in place now. We had 2 orientation sessions. It's a wonderful group, professional, smart. So they did the training. The only thing left we have now is some ride-alongs and some virtual shoot, don't shoot scenarios, use of force scenarios, which we have to continue to schedule out. But we're very excited and look forward to this partnership. In box number 6 is our pilot program, which is now concluded, dealing with our body cams. We finished just prior to July 1st, moving over to the last box here in the highlighted yellow. We selected a vendor. That vendor is Axon. We will be applying for the state grant at 30%. Again, we cannot apply for the grant until we expend the funding and make the purchases. Currently, it's in finance, and they're working out the details on making the purchase, and so we can sign the contract and go forward. So I'm very pleased with the assistance from the town, from finance, and our own personnel who went through several vendors to make this decision. Down to box number 7, 1033 program. We have returned, going to our last box, 19 rifles to an Army base in Michigan. I've got the approval process from the United States military, and they were returned back on May 5th of this year. Box number 8, I'm just going to skip down quickly. This deals with social services and us working together in our partnership. Just earlier this afternoon, myself, Chief Tara, Director Helen Rabina Turco, and Supervisor Asher Calderon, we have conducted a oral panel interview with a potential hire for a social worker. We all were very impressed with this individual. And again, as part of the Police Accountability Bill, working in partnership and collaboration with the police department to go out to certain calls for service that really the police department should not be the point, but we will provide assistance. So there will not be a situation where this individual goes into the field and we will not be there to stand as backup. But at least that first interaction will not be a uniform, and it will be somebody trained and to provide the assistance, mental health, landlord, tenant, and the like. Box 9, we're still doing our efforts to increase minority hires. Currently right now we have 13 vacancies. We'll soon have 15 with retirement and another situation that's occurred. So we have a lot of vacancies. The good thing is we are getting a bunch of folks to go through our process, which is good. The quality of some isn't the best. We have not lowered our standards, which does help us run through the list, but we are getting, good numbers of people coming through. So in that effort to reach out to the community and put our message out there and to let people get a taste to what it's like to be a West Hartford police officer, we did reinstitute our 4-week college police academy this a couple months ago. It was very successful. I think we had somewhere between 24 participants, and at least one of those participants who was over 21 has applied for West Hartford. So again, that's awesome to hear. And again, it shows how the importance of this, and it shows we can have that conduit to the police department. In addition, we had our supervisors and command staff go through a community engagement program by the Stratford Police Department. Part of what this training is, and by the way, it's post-certified, so our people get post credits for attending this training. So that brings up the credibility with it. And the intent and the purpose of this training is to advise our people, as well as the public, this community, these officers also go out into the community and provide this program. This was tailored for our police officers, our upper management, to understand the true history of policing. I believe you've heard me speak about this in the past with the role of law enforcement, black codes, peonage, and all these things, civil rights going forward, and providing our personnel the understanding how certain groups might look and view police officers. And conversely, educating the public on what we do, how we do it, why we do it. So it was a very good session. It was an 8-hour block, good dialogue, excellent presentation. And again, we believe that as it filters down with our line officers will improve our relations and our ability to interact with our communities and continue to break down barriers, which in turn we hope would entice people to be part of our family at the West Hartford Police Department. That concludes my presentation on the community action plan. If I can only get out of this thing, we shall be fine. I can entertain any questions through you, Madam Chair.
Certainly. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Councilor Blanks. I wanted to add just a couple of points to Chief Riddick's very good presentation. Thank you, Chief. First, I wanted to thank Mayor Cantor and our chairperson, Councilor Blanks, for reaching out to the chief and myself a couple weeks ago, really to talk about the need for us to interface with the community and to encourage us to engage in these community conversations. So we certainly appreciate their support and their guidance. Secondly, I also wanted to report on the fact that Chief, the mayor, and I recently met. We recently met with our state delegation to talk more specifically about some of the issues we're talking about tonight, but in particular, youthful offenders. So we talked about things such as detention centers and information sharing among departments. We talked about the differences between detaining and taking someone into custody and the need to be able to, for a police department, to be able to hold a juvenile for a longer period of time than what they're presently allowed to do under state law. We also talked about the state pursuit policy and how we think that might need to be amended. So our legislators did inform us, and you may already know this, that the General Assembly has formed a bipartisan, bicameral special committee to review all of these issues. And we are going to be presenting our recommendations to the delegation. We will share those with the committee and the council, and I think they will give them due consideration. So I think that that information is responsive to Councilor Williams' questions as well. Thank you.
Through you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
Chief.
It's Chief Riddick speaking. I will go into further detail what the town manager mentioned. I just wanted to pause now and just, if there's any questions on the community action plan, and then I'll go into further detail with those issues you just brought up too, just so everyone knows that. That's all.
Thank you, Chief. Before I go to you, Counselor Gold, Counselor Williams, did you have a response?
No, Madam Chairman, I appreciate the information.
Thank you. Counselor Gold.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. Chief Riddick, thank you very much, and Mr. Hart for the very extensive discussion and information that you were able to provide. Maybe you could comment a little bit on, I guess, the additional resources and the needs of the department and the town to implement this action plan as it goes forward, and what maybe we would expect that would be needed to implement everything that's here, and maybe what you would anticipate beyond that.
Through you, Madam Chair, Chief Riddick. Actually, we're excellent in position right now. I'll go to the social worker. We have decided through discussion to make sure we can finance this. The police department will be financing the social worker, out of our budget. So we're fine with that. The money is available. I've been told, and I trust Peter, Privatera from Finance, for the body cams and for the community outreach. Again, these are things that we normally do anyways. And notwithstanding COVID, we went out there a whole lot more last year. So we're in a good financial position. I think resource-wise, let me back up. Financial resource-wise, yes. Human capital, as I just mentioned, we are down personnel by it's not as a result of lack of support from the town. It's not a result of lack of available funding. It's just a matter of this is the situation we're in with a bunch of retirements. And we anticipated this. I've been before this body previously saying, hey, this was coming. So other than that, no, we're in a good position to accomplish this without a huge amount of money that we need to undertake.
Mr. Gold.
No, thank you very much, Ms. Blanks and Chief and Mr. Hart. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So with respect to the community conversation, which is anticipated to be next week, can you give the committee some heads up as to how we're going to publicize this to the community? I think the community is, in terms of social media, very ripe and excited and anxious all at the same time to learn more about what our response is to the variety of property crimes, the ATV situation, the youthful offender situation. And there's really been no shortage of opinion in the community with respect to what they think ought to be done. So I'm just interested as to what we plan on doing in terms of notifying the community to let them know that this is going to occur. I do think that there's a lot of interest in our community to hear from you, Chief, as to what resources and what solutions and what plans are in the works to address this, or things that we already have done to address these things. So just would be curious to hear that response.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Hart, you would like to take that first, and then Chief?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Hart, Town Manager. In response to Deputy Mayor's good question, we'll plan to utilize all of our social media resources as well as a press release. Both the town and the police department's social media pages. Normally we can get pretty good coverage through those resources. We also, at the town level, as you may know, we utilize Constant Contact. We have a number of subscribers to that. So I think those using social media as well as issuing a press release reaching out to WeHod.com and others. I think we'll be able to get the word out there starting tomorrow. And assuming next week goes well, Chief and I will look to hold another forum as well after an appropriate interval.
Chief Riddick, through you, Madam Chair. Again, that's accurate. In the police department, through Hootsuite, which is attached to our website, our Facebook page, our Instagram page, we can push this out in addition to the press release, and we normally get a good return from that and a good turnout. So we're looking forward to it.
Thank you, Chief and Mr. Hart. Any other questions or comments? So I have a couple. And first of all, I want to really say thank you to both you, Mr. Hart, and Chief Riddick, as well as Chief Priest, because I remember over a year ago, a number of these issues were, I want to say, sort of at the infancy. A lot of stuff was going on, and we put some things in place in terms of strategizing. What could we do to address a number of these issues that necessarily weren't police type of issues in terms of enforcement, but were more social and mental health issues. So I really just want to send my congrats and kudos to you all, where you really sat around the table and really delved into the issues and looked at what was most needed, because we have that partnership with, I believe it's Interval House, and now we're having that social worker come on board. So, I mean, I think that's just great that we're actually looking, we're planning, and then we're bringing people on to address a lot of these issues to sort of de-escalate, to use your words, some of the things that are happening in town and then being blown up, out of proportion. That I think when we get ahead of it and we're proactive, that we can minimize a lot of the things that are happening. A couple of questions that I have. One is around the social media in terms of how we use it. Now, I heard your explanation, but the reason why I bring this up is because from our ongoing conversations, it seems to be a common denominator when we hear about either the thefts or the burglaries in cars, that most of the time that unfortunately our neighbors, mine and yours, either forget their key fob or they're not locking their car for whatever reason. And so I'm wondering, how can we drive that message home? And I'm not, placing blame with anybody, saying we do stuff seasonal, but I'm looking at some type of long-term solution, and not necessarily coming from the town professionals, but how do we engage our community neighbors, whether it's through block watch groups, community association or organizations or what have you. We recently talked about our business associations where not everybody is active. Is there a way that we can turn that around and have everybody own what's happening in town?
I don't have that answer. I can tell you what we've done and what we plan on continue to do. I mean, since the beginning of time, how do you change behavior? And how do you change behavior of an individual or someone in their own home? And most behaviors change after something happens. For example, we put out a press release several months ago regarding our camera program. And many people, forgot about it. We didn't do a good job of probably reinforcing that going forward. But we had a tickler back in November of 2020. We had a press release that came out in January of 2021. Stickers and sharing the videos and everything else. Not a huge response, but again, we own some of that too, and that we sort of kept this on the forefront. And as this was brought up by you and the mayor, Madam Chair, how that's a deficiency we have to work on. So we're working on that. But we've had the 9 p.m. routine. You've had yours truly, yelling from the mountaintop at various meetings or community meetings, and these forums here are speaking about that. In addition, we've had our personnel go to the neighborhood meetings and talk about these things ad nauseum. So I think it's, again, if we go to the essence of community policing, it's community and the police working together. So there has to be ownership with all of us, public safety committee, town council, business owners, homeowners, collectively to take the appropriate steps to protect their property. So I don't have the overall answer, but I think collectively put our smart folks together here like we're doing this evening, we can continue. I think our strategy is good, but we always can get better.
Thank you, Chief. And and I see you, Mr. Hart. I'll get to you. I just want to say that I appreciate the consistent steps that you and your team are doing, towards improvement. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Just to add to the Chief's very good comments, I think we want to continue to engage the community. As the Chief talked about, that's the essence of community policing, developing that partnership. And we've done that successfully over the years, largely through in-person interactions, largely through that means. We want to continue that because we think it's effective, but also layer on top of it these virtual tools that we've all become accustomed to utilizing over the past year. We think this is another, it's a platform, it's a great way to get in touch with a segment or segments of our community that may not be available for an in-person meeting, may not be available to attend business association meetings, etc. So I think it's going to have to be a combined approach and something we're going to have to do at regular intervals throughout the year.
Totally. I absolutely agree with that.
Can
All
I
right,
add
anybody?
to you, Madam Chair, just one additional point?
Absolutely.
Another phenomenon, and this is legit and it's real, what happens is many times people believe it won't happen to me. And that's where the education comes in. And how many times where I can't believe it happened, or it was that person, or I can't believe this happened in my neighborhood. And that's where the education component comes in. That's where the intersection of education, opportunity, and change. And, that's just something we have to deal with. And we'll continue that fight. And not to get political, but look at the whole vaccine situation that's going on. And for many of us, it's a life and death situation that has turned political. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Chief. It's funny that you end with that because some of these what we think right now are minor crimes are certainly turning into these life and death situations. And I want myself and this committee to do exactly what we're doing to be proactive so that we avoid that type of tragedy in our town. Okay, so if there aren't any other comments or questions, I would like to move our meeting along because I want to be respectful of our time. And so the next item on the agenda is communications. Mr. Hart, okay, Chief?
Through you, Madam Chair, Chief Riddick, I actually have more to go. I know
Okay,
I've laughed
you
for
do.
a long
Go
time.
on.
And I also want to make sure I answer Councilor Williams' question. So I will try to get through this. And I can see Chief Priest smiling because I am being long-winded for once, which is definitely not my MO. But let me get through this. We've had issues with the catalytic converter thefts, ATVs going through town. But when it comes to the ATVs, let's just keep it in perspective. This is not something of frequent occurrence in West Hartford. It was sort of an aberration to have that many amount of ATVs and motorcycles and dirt bikes coming through town. But regardless, it happened. And these things from time to time do occur. So keep that in perspective. And stolen motor vehicles, again, ongoing occurrence. If we can remember, as part of this group in early 2020, we were having this discussion, pre-pandemic, with the Auto Dept task force to be implemented and had some success with. But then as COVID came in, we had to, pull that back and, reallocate our resources. So what are we doing? We have the state has the funding from the recovery money, and we have the $5 million that has been passed through the state to some of the towns for the regional task force that West Hartford is participating in. There's several hubs, New Haven, Waterbury, Bridgeport, Hartford, and a couple of standalone towns that are receiving this money. excuse me, it's a total of $5 million for the bucket, not each town getting 5 million, but it's a total of $5 million. So we're working, and the point for our region obviously is Hartford. So we're working with them. We will be adding 2 officers to this task force, and they will be dealing specifically with violent crime, stolen motor vehicles, and a catalytic converter thefts. So we are participating with that with some of our surrounding towns. 2, we have 2 police officers who are part of our statewide narcotics task force. Again, it's the increases our reach and our utilization of resources and partnerships. And we also have an officer part of the Federal Violent Crime Task Force stationed here in our region, the CAP region. So not only do we have access to him, we also have access to that entire task force to come in and to address some of these violent crimes and some of these motor vehicle thefts. So that's extremely important. The catalytic converters, we need to do a better job as the police department, and as was brought up by you, Madam Chair, and the mayor and the town manager through our private conversation that we had, to publicize what people can do to protect their catalytic converters, purchasing the shields, having better lighting, strategically parking their vehicles, and get that information out there for people to do that crime prevention strategy and techniques that are necessary. Continue to going forward, our center detail, we've heard some issues, late night at our center detail with the restaurants and that crowd on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, and the trash that's out there. So we have a center detail, and most folks might not know this. We dedicate sometimes 4 to 6 officers, minimum 4, on these details in the evening on LaSalle, Farmington, and behind some of these businesses as a deterrent, so we don't have fights and to make sure the quality of life issues don't occur. Obviously, that takes away from other parts of town, but it's a priority. We utilize that. Over the last couple weeks, with the direction from the town manager, we've utilized, we expanded and started utilizing our drone to, again, force multiplier so we can see what's going on, see who's dumping trash. There was a fight that was going to occur. We had the drone that was up so officers can go in and prevented that fight from happening. So we're out there. We've also, in the process of establishing, we're going to roll out with a press release, a tip line, and an email. So people can give us tips for a variety of crimes, ATVs, catalytic converters, stolen motor vehicles, whatever that issue is. And that phone number will go to our detective bureau. And at least for 2 of the shifts, we should have somebody answering the phone. But regardless, there will be a answering service, and we have an email for the information. So we'll be rolling that out very, very soon. As I mentioned briefly before, our camera program with our officers on foot going door to door in the center, reminding folks that we have this program. Again, with conversations with you, the mayor and the town manager, we got out there and we've already went to upwards of 70 businesses, already, and talked about the camera program and just finding out and soliciting information from them to the problems and some solutions they might have to quality of life. And again, quelling some misinformation and things that are going out there. To Councilor Williams, yes, oh, I'm sorry, but you're talking to me. So Councilor Williams' question, we have had meetings with different delegations, the town manager, myself, and the mayor just had one, I believe it was yesterday or the day before. I have a couple scheduled myself because of my role with Post and other things that I'm involved with. So we're open for these discussions. The CPCA, Connecticut Police Association, some of the things that we want to offer to the delegations, and hopefully we can get some moving on. One is information sharing. Although law enforcement officials can share information amongst themselves, we don't have a mechanism with a vehicle to do that outside of a phone call versus judicial. We can't get into the judicial database where you can punch in a juvenile's name and find out all we want is their prior arrest history. That's all. So this way we'll know if a person, juvenile, is involved with a situation. Is this an aberration? Because we've all done some stupid stuff when we were young, right? I don't think any of us are innocent here. But versus somebody's a repeat offender. And if we know that, that might dictate whether or not we do an order to detain or we give them a juvenile summons in relation to the custody of their parent. A couple other items we discussed, freezing raise the age for juveniles to keep that flat where it's at. A very huge part of this issue is, again, law enforcement comes in, we do crime prevention, but at the same time, we make arrests and stuff after the fact. This is really a holistic approach and really nothing new since the end of time. We have to get services to these families. If your kid is out 1, 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning, either you're allowing the juvenile to be out or you can't control them. And if you can't control them, there's force and law enforcement to get involved here in a realm we really shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be. So there needs to be resources, parenting classes to assist these parents, and things along those lines. Again, out of the scope really of law enforcement. Repeat offenders needs to be consequences to this. Again, we're not talking about a single action or somebody makes a mistake once or twice. We will also discuss the ankle program, the ankle bracelet, and the ankle monitoring, putting that into place to see where these juveniles are, where these folks are. Part of the problem is at the state level is to staff these. So it's nice to have the ankle monitor, but you need to have somebody to monitor the monitor. So that's another thing. Our juvenile detention centers, we only have 2. Before we had 3. And one thing that we can actually, well, 2 more things. One, the town manager mentioned potentially extending the amount of time that law enforcement can hold a juvenile. Currently it's 6 hours, and within those 6 hours, we have to make an attempt to find a parent. And if we do not do that within that time, we have to release them or put in the custody of an order to detain if it meets the criteria. If not, they have to go. So if we can extend it to 24 hours or so, that'll be very helpful. And again, not for punishment, but give us an opportunity to reach that parent and maybe with some other counseling or something else in the meantime, provide us as a deterrent as opposed to catch and release. And lastly, there was mention that was about the pursuit policy and the like. You're not going to find too many chiefs who are going to be in favor of increasing our ability for pursuits. They don't end well. Rarely either the car runs out of gas or they crash. So we're not advocating that. What we are trying to do, and this is in the realm of post-council, which I do sit on, and we're going to raise this issue, is taking out the stop sticks, the tire deflation devices, out of the category of roadblocks, out of the categories of boxing in, out of the categories of a use of force situation, or a higher level use of force situation to lower level. So when we don't meet the threshold for a pursuit, which has to be violence or a felony, then maybe for these lower level crimes, if someone takes off, we can utilize the tire deflation device, whereas now per statute and policy, we cannot, but with that change, we'd be permitted to and allowed to. So that being said, we are doing a lot. We will continue to do a lot. And just for edification, we started keeping stats on the amount of vehicles that flee from us, and there's not a pursuit. So we started doing this in late part of February. So February through 2 days ago, we've had 47 vehicles just take off from us. We would take an opportunity to try to stop them. We put our lights on. They know we can't pursue them, and they just don't stop, and they go, and we do not pursue. We shut down the lights, and we pull over to the side. So that's 47 occasions, and who knows what they were up to. One time we actually interrupted a Cadillac converter theft. We had a Cadillac converter detail, I neglected to mention that has been operational for the past several weeks during the overnight hours. And during their efforts, they caught a theft in progress. Individual jumped in their vehicle and took off. We tried to stop them. They didn't stop, and they got away. So I think I rambled long enough, and through you, Madam Chair, I won't entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. No, that was important. And I thank you and appreciate, that report and the presentation, because it does show the progress under your leadership and the PD and the team and all what we're trying to do to keep our residents, businesses, and youth in town safe. And we're aware what the issues are, and we're definitely trying to get in front of it and minimize it. So thank you for all you do. Counselor Williams.
Madam Chairwoman, I didn't have a question, but since you raised that, thank Chief Riddick for I feel like I was cold called on in school. But since you called on me, Chief Riddick, thanks for the presentation, the comments, and I hope the state delegation and the public will listen to you. You're very clairvoyant. I remember, like I said, about a year and a half ago when you're talking about car thefts, you said it's not just the theft that's the problem. Everyone's focusing on the theft. It's what then happens afterwards. And that whole situation with the toddler in the car leading up to an accident and then injured two other people. It's a chain of events, and you brought that up precisely whenever it was. So hope folks will listen to you and appreciate your comments tonight. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
You're welcome, Counselor Williams. Any other comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Chief, I think you hit it out of the ballpark because you basically went through all the things that people are talking about in the community with respect to the variety of crimes and instances that are taking place. And you've basically highlighted where you hit a roadblock or where the system doesn't allow you as currently in place to go any further. So it really will be part of a community conversation where members of our community really have to encourage those who are in a position to make change, to encourage them to assist and to make these changes. This is what our community wants. This is what our community expects. The way to keep us safe, to keep our crime rates down. There needs to be changes because it just cannot continue the way that things are. Because if it just continues the way things are happening, we're going to get the same results, and people are going to see increased levels of frustration and wonder, well, I don't really understand why this continues and why can't this happen? Why can't the police department do X, Y, and Z? And I think tonight you basically went through a variety of the scenarios and illustrated for the members of the committee why you can't. And I think that's going to be very important as part of the conversation. And I think that our community is quite engaged, quite intelligent, and they're going to say, well, how can we be partners with you, Chief, to accomplish some of these changes that are so necessary? That's what I'm hoping, and that would be my expectation. But I do think you basically went through the entire laundry list of things that I've heard discussions with members of the community over the last few months. And so there's no doubt in my mind that the department and the leadership and the people on the front line are quite aware of exactly what's going on. So that's not the issue, knowing what's going on. The issue is you can only go so far right now. So I'm looking forward to that discussion next week and what other steps we can take to help facilitate and hopefully improve the things that you're able to do to resolve some of these issues. So thank you very much for the thoroughness of your presentation and your remarks, sir.
Thank you,
Hi,
Deputy Mayor.
Madam Chair. Sorry, I'm not on video right now, so I apologize. But I also wanted to thank the town manager and the chief for their leadership and their partnership, and always, very willing to step forward and to listen and collaborate. So great guidance and wonderful leadership. And I know Carol and I have had many conversations. I have had many conversations with the town manager and the police chief on many of these elements that he went over tonight. So really, really grateful. Chief, you mentioned something yesterday, and I don't know if you're ready to roll it out, but it was a good question actually from Representative Gilchrist, I think, on de-escalation by individuals. And it was some kind of release that we were talking about public service announcements on a variety of things that the citizens could do. Could you talk to that for a minute?
Sure. I want to make sure that I understand what you're actually asking me, to be honest with you. I think we were trying to give out some steps of crime prevention steps, target hardening, cameras, positioning of the vehicle, locking your doors. And also, I think we also got into a discussion regarding one of the biggest changes that we've seen, and this goes directly to Councilor Williams' point that we talked about, they just mentioned, that I hate to say we predicted, but we forecast some of this occurring a couple of years ago, is this really started years prior, to this, where we'd have, remember we had carjacking that started in the 80s or so, where people come with a weapon and really just take someone's vehicle, and then that went down. What we're seeing now is when these situations with their people with their vehicles and coming out, it's your property. So you walk out your house, hey, leave my car alone. And now these perpetrators are firing weapons at people who don't have a weapon. We've seen this happen in Cheshire, Glastonbury, and I think it was Simsbury also, Hartford. This is dangerous. That's the escalation that we're talking about when there's no, let me not say no, when it appears the perception is there's no consequences and people are not being held accountable for their actions. So as a public service announcement, we'd want folks just to call the police. If you see something going on, I can't tell you not to yell out of your window, but please don't confront anyone. It's not safe. You don't know what the mindset is of this individual. Call the police. Tell us what you have. We will be there within minutes. I assure you of that. So I hope, Madam Mayor, that's what you were talking about, and that was part of our discussion. Through you,
Thank
Madam
you so
Chair.
much. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments or questions? Okay, if we don't have any, we can move to the next agenda item, which is communications, but it seems like we did a lot of communication during our committee meeting tonight. So I don't know if we have anything else we want to add, Mr. Town Manager.
Madam Chair, Matt Hart, Town Manager. No, Chief Priest does have a few items he would like to touch on under staff reports, and I have 2 items at the end under staff reports as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hart. And so, Chief Priest, I'll turn it over to you for your staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Normally, we would probably have some sort of ribbing for the police chief, but in this particular case, I'd like to tell you how humbled I am to be part of the public safety leadership team and to be working with such a thoughtful, insightful, and talented police chief. I'm proud to be able to work with him on a regular basis. So, with that, Chief Cincy had a fantastic report, from my opinion. I really appreciated that. One thing I wanted to note, I know he's left as he was teaching tonight, but I want to recognize his hard work but the attitude that he brings to that, just knowing how much work is in front of him and how well he has organized his team and how hard they work to try and meet all of their statutory obligations. I did want that to be recognized. We suffered a firefighter line of duty loss today in Connecticut. Chief Cincy alluded to it in his report. Burlington firefighter Colin McFadden lost his life as part of an illness or an injury sustained fighting a fire. And with your prerogative, it would be all right for just a quick moment to recognize his loss.
Absolutely.
So we're very sorry for that. Our heart breaks for his family, his fire department, and we'll stand ready to assist their department as they need anything going forward. Madam Chair, you also alluded to another incident that occurred earlier this week regarding a drowning. I too echo your comments about my thoughts go out to the family. And although that it was an unsuccessful outcome and a tragic outcome, I wanted to highlight the cooperation of the police department, the fire department, and their heroic efforts to provide that victim with every opportunity for success possible. I believe that the joint efforts resulted in her being located within approximately 11 minutes of the first arrival, and it's a very unusual situation for West Hartford. And there was a great team effort towards trying to make that happen. So I just wanted to say thanks to those members that participated. And then lastly, I'm trying my best to end on a positive note. The department submitted for and was honored to receive a $350,000 Fema Grant that goes towards the training of fire officers or developing fire personnel that will allow for 3 certification classes. There is a 10% town match, but when looking at the totality of the financial impact of the town, that is very minimal to be able to accelerate the learning and the training of our fire officers. We look forward to discussing that further, but hopefully we may have your support so that we can proceed with bringing that needed training. And I'd like to thank Chief O'Callahan, Captain Pacheco, and firefighter paramedic Jason Urban, who's no longer with the department, for their work on that. That's a tremendous amount of effort that's resulted in a great financial benefit and training for the town. So with that, I conclude. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. If anyone has any questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Chief Priest. Any questions or comments? And I would echo your congratulations on that grant due to the hard work of you and your team. So thank you for that. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Councilor Blanks. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I'd like to thank the 2 chiefs for their excellent presentations tonight. I have 2 important items to bring to the committee's attention. First, I wanted to let you know, and we reported it on this at the Human and Community Services Committee meeting this morning. Ms. Rubino Turco, working in collaboration with the police department and others, did organize and conducted a regional panhandling roundtable. That was for staff. They conducted that on July 14th. Recall, we talked about the importance of that in our earlier meetings. That session, they had over 20 people from area police departments, from Hartford's community court, from nonprofit agencies, municipal social workers. They all got together to talk about the issue, and I think they exchanged a lot of very, very good ideas. Our Capital Region Council of Governments helped to organize that meeting, and they have agreed to convene these on a regular basis, and they'll hold their next one on November 9th. So kudos to us, to the committee, for initiating this idea. It was a good session on July 14th, and I think it's just a really good example of departments, public sector, nonprofit world, police, and social services working together in a collaborative manner to begin to address a very complex issue in panhandling. So I wanted to let you know about that. And then secondly, I wanted to talk about the potential for a mask order, which is informally referred to as a mask mandate. I'm sure you've heard that term utilized quite extensively in the press. So as the committee and council is well aware, late last week, the mayor and I issued a communication to our community focused most specifically on businesses and nonprofits and other establishments, just really encouraging them to require their patrons, employees, and others to wear a face covering or a mask indoors, right? Because we see that as such an essential component to mitigating community spread of COVID-19. So we issued that guidance, in just casual observation. Many businesses are complying with the request, others are not. We continue to watch the data, and we continue to see what's happening statewide. And we believe we need to be prepared. We need to be prepared to progress to the next step, which would be an executive order issued by me requiring establishments in town to require patrons, employees, etc., to wear a face mask, a face covering indoors. Recall, under our incident command system, we have established an executive policy group that consists of the mayor, myself, the chiefs, the superintendent of schools, corporation counsel, our health director, our public relations specialist, and our deputy emergency manager. We discussed this idea at some length at our meeting earlier this week. And what we decided would be a good threshold for West Hartford is that once we reached that red category, and you may recall that is 15 cases per day per 100,000 of population. Once we reach that threshold, that I would issue that executive order requiring face masks. I do have the most recent data from the health district, which I will forward to the committee and the town council following tonight's meeting. We are rapidly, unfortunately, we are rapidly approaching that threshold. So what I have here, I just want to spend a moment or two reading this from our health director, Amy Kraus, and our epidemiologist on staff. Over the past week, we've had 71 new cases reported here in West Hartford and 30 from Bloomfield. So our case rates per 100,000 population over the last 2 weeks, it's at 12.3 for West Hartford and 16.2 for Bloomfield. So based on those case rates, West Hartford right now remains in the orange category, and Bloomfield has now entered the red category. Given this trajectory, we expect that West Hartford is likely to reach that red category as early as next week. So I have asked Corporation Counsel to prepare an executive order that I would issue if we reach that threshold. And we are planning, the mayor and I, to issue a joint press release probably tomorrow, just giving the community a heads up that if we reach that threshold, we will be issuing that order. I know that's a tough decision to make. I'm sure the reaction from the community will be mixed. I'm sure many will welcome it, including business establishments. I'm sure others will have an opposite reaction. But we do feel our executive policy group is very united in this. We do feel as though this is an appropriate step, just given transmission rates and what's going on. And the science certainly indicates that face coverings are one of the more effective tools we have to mitigate community spread. So I want to give you a heads up that we're likely to issue a press release tomorrow, Monday at the latest, just preparing to issue that executive order. I'll stop there. I don't know if the mayor wants to add any comments to that, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mayor Cantor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, and this is, I think what we were hoping is that the numbers would either level out or start to go down a little bit. The other thing that we were hopeful for is that the state would make a, would do something that was consistent in the way they have done so in the past. And in talking with the governor's office, they're not prepared to do that yet. So seeing where our numbers are headed and the fact that, I don't think it's beneficial to us to wait for another week or so. I think it's important for us to step forward and to do this now. And I think, it's 7 days or 14 days. If we look at the 7-day, we are right on the edge of the red. So, so we expect that, if we were to get the updated numbers tomorrow or the next day, that we will be there. I will say this morning I participated in a call with one of our West Hartford celebrities, Dr. Peter Hotez, and Dr. Kumar from the Executive Vice President and Chief Clinical Officer from Hartford Healthcare. And it was very clear that this was their advice to have masking because even with vaccinated people, there is a decline, and I think Pfizer and some of the studies that have come out from Israel and from the UK, that there is a decline over time of the efficacy of the vaccine, and that's obviously why boosters are being discussed and even actually being advised now for immunocompromised individuals. So we are, we think all of the dynamics that are happening right now are important for us to take the action that we need to take, and that is to advise or to have not issued the mask mandate, and not have this be a strong urging. So I'm a little disappointed that some more businesses didn't automatically have a mandate within themselves. So that's unfortunate, but that's where we are right now. And I would say, I urge that one Dr. Kumar said, evolving science, numbers change all the time, and our minds also need to change depending on the numbers changing. And that's what we're doing right now at this moment. So I don't think we need to say when we're going to, either how long we're going to leave this on or when we're going to take it off. I think the numbers will tell us. So when we see a change in the direction of the numbers, the trajectory of the numbers, then we can definitely reevaluate. But right now, the trajectory is definitely going in the wrong direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Over to you, Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just have two questions and a comment. The questions are, what is the mandate look like for the restaurants in town? And then, so would the mandate stop once the numbers start to decline into the orange? Would there be a metric? So those are the two questions.
Mr. Hart.
Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you, Councilor Williams, for your good questions. Indoor dining would still be permitted in accordance with CDC and DPH guidelines. And with respect to when we would remove the order, I think as the mayor said, when numbers decline, that's when we would anticipate removing it. Maybe, this will turn out to be a crest with the Delta variant, like other nations and other geographic regions have experienced. Maybe we will see that, maybe it will be more sustained. But when our numbers begin to decline below that red and orange level, I think then we would look to remove the order.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Councilor Williams, anything further, follow-up?
Yeah, I'll just say this, and I know it's going to be the unpopular position, and that's fine because I'm sort of used to it at this level, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in the masks and all of this has been so politicized that it's hard to have a productive discussion. So I'm not trying to make this issue political. I'm not running again, but this is just my thoughts. The mask mandate disturbs me. A year and a half out now. And I know it disturbs all of us. I'm not saying that it doesn't disturb you, Mr. Hart, or you, Madam Mayor. But when we first started with the mask mandates, it was to stop the spread, and the goal was not to overwhelm the medical system. And here we are 18 months later, or whatever it is. And yes, the cases are up, but what does that mean in terms of the impact on the citizenry? We have a very high vaccine rate. As far as I know, the medical system in Connecticut, because of that high vaccine rate, is not being overwhelmed. So yes, cases are going up, but does that mean that it's coming to a harm to the system where the government needs to come and compel certain behaviors? My opinion is that it does not. This is not the case today that we were in the beginning, the genesis of this, when we sat in town hall and Chief Priest told us about the pandemic and what we needed to expect, where we didn't know how it was transmitted. We didn't know the impact it would have people who were most sort of susceptible to it. Here we are a year and a half later, we have a much better idea of who is susceptible, how is transmitted. We have vaccines. And so I think from my position, we need to leave it more to the public, to our businesses, on how they choose to navigate these waters. And mandates, to me, at this point, are very uncomfortable, and I have a strong objection to them. Although what I'm not saying is that you, Mr. Hart, don't share those concerns. What I'm saying is I come to a different conclusion, just because of how I see the situation on the ground, and I think I would do myself a disservice if I didn't express that to you.
Thank you, Counselor Williams. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Hart? Okay. All right. Let's see. So the next item is any other business or future agenda items that anyone would like to raise, discuss, bring up? Okay, hearing none. I don't have an agenda item or other, but I know I've expressed sort of offline, and we could talk about this offline. So about a year and 5, 6, 7, 8 months ago, we were locked down because of the pandemic. And so I really couldn't visit any of the facilities. So I still would like to do that at some point. Chief Priest and Chief Riddick, certainly Chief Priest, I would like to get a sense of the 5 firehouses and get just a visual, instead of reading the print. And I'd also like to visit the firing range in town, and some of your facilities, so I can really see what our men and women experience, even if it's just a snapshot for me. I don't know about a ride along right now, Chief Priest. I could do that virtual, but you hear what I'm saying, so we can discuss this offline, Mr. Town Manager. Okay, so if I don't see anything else, I don't see any other hands, so I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Thank you so much. So we stand adjourned, and the time is 8:19. So please, everyone, stay safe and stay healthy until we all meet again. Have some ice cream.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Take care.